All right, so today we're diving into something pretty intense, faith and history, how they kind of clash.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area.
You guys sent in this video, right, by Jaden Forrest, and it's got these three debates between Cliff Conley, he's a Christian apologist, and some Muslim challengers.
Right.
And it gets, it's pretty deep, right?
It does. And it's not just agree to disagree. They're really getting into like the core of how they view truth.
Yeah.
What's fascinating to me is that they both have this respect for Jesus, but their views on whether he's divine or not are just radically different.
Right. And that's not just like a difference of opinion. That's like foundational to both faiths, right?
Exactly.
And it made me think about like, how do we even decide what's true in history anyway? Like when we're looking back at accounts.
That's a great point.
Conley, he kept quoting all these Bible verses, right? Where Jesus seems to be claiming he's God.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Muslim debaters were like, hold on. Those texts could have been like corrupted over time.
Yeah. And that's where the whole field of textual criticism comes in, right?
Oh, yeah. Explain that.
It's kind of like historical detective work. You've got scholars like Dr. Daniel Wallace, who argue that the New Testament is actually incredibly accurate based on the number of manuscripts and how consistent they are.
Oh, okay.
But then you have, skeptics like Bart Ehrman, who are much more cautious about it.
Right. It's not just like blind faith on either side.
Exactly.
There's like a method to it, right?
Absolutely.
Wow. That's so interesting. I never thought about it like that. That there's this whole like academic discipline.
Yeah.
Even to disagreeing about the Bible. But one thing that really stuck out to me was when the Muslim debater was like, wait a minute. The Gospels, they were written in Greek, but Jesus spoke Aramaic. Like, did something get messed up in translation?
That's a question that comes up all the time.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that Greek was like the common language of the time because of the Roman Empire.
Oh, right.
It's like, think of English today. It's spoken all over the world, even where it's not the native language.
Mm.
The Gospels, they wanted to reach as many people as possible, so Greek was the way to do it.
So it wasn't just like they got the language wrong kind of thing.
Exactly. It was more about accessibility.
Okay. But then Conley, he comes back with this whole thing about like eyewitness accounts.
Right.
And specifically the Gospels. He makes this funny analogy. He's like, trusting Muhammad's account of Jesus centuries later is like relying on, Martin Scorsese to tell you about Jesus' life?
Yeah, I remember that. That was a good one.
Yeah.
It's a funny analogy. But historians use this concept called mass transmission.
Oh, what's that?
The idea is if like a lot of people across different communities all tell the same story.
Okay.
There's a good chance there's some truth to it, like historical truth.
It's like a crowdsourced version of history.
Exactly.
But then how do you know they're not all just repeating the same like made up story?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Mass transmission, it's useful, but it has limitations.
Right.
Memories are tricky. Biases can creep in. Stories change over time. It's not foolproof.
Okay, so it's like one piece of the puzzle,
Yeah.
not the whole picture.
Right.
So we've got these ancient languages to consider, this whole mass transmission thing. And then Conley brings up the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, look, this is evidence for the Old Testament's accuracy.
Those are huge.
Yeah, those are a big deal, right?
Absolutely. They're a collection of ancient Jewish texts discovered back in the mid-20th century.
Okay.
And they include parts of the Hebrew Bible, but like centuries before Jesus.
Okay, so why is that important to Conley's argument? It's not just that they're old scrolls, right?
Yeah, that's part of it, but it's more about the consistency.
Okay.
The Dead Sea Scrolls show how meticulously Jewish scribes copied those sacred texts.
Mm-hmm.
They were so careful, and the scrolls are remarkably consistent with the Hebrew Bible we have today.
So for Conley, that's like, see, the Old Testament hasn't been changed that much.
Right.
But doesn't that ignore what the Muslim debaters were saying? Like, they were pretty adamant that the Quran is the more reliable source.
Yeah. And one of their arguments is that it was preserved in the original Arabic,
Oh, right.
while the New Testament wasn't in the language Jesus spoke.
Which, yeah, makes you think, how accurate can any translation be?
Yeah.
Especially with religious texts. Every word matters, right?
It's a valid point.
Yeah.
But it's worth noting that translation isn't always a bad thing. The goal is to get the meaning across accurately, and there are, really careful methods for doing that.
Right.
Scholars spend years studying languages, the historical context, to make sure it's right.
It's not like Google Translate.
No, not at all.
Okay, phew. That makes me feel a little better. But then Conley goes and argues that blindly believing any book is inspired by God, that takes a leap of faith. And the Muslim debaters, they push back hard on that.
Yeah, things got a little tense there.
It felt like it was getting personal.
It did. And it gets to this like core difference in how they see scripture. For Christians, the Bible, it's inspired by God, but it's written by humans.
Right.
So it's God's message, but through this human lens, right?
But the Quran, for Muslims, it's like direct from God, right? Like dictated to Muhammad by the angel Gabriel.
Exactly. And that difference shapes how they each use their scripture.
Oh, wow.
But Conley, he's not saying faith is irrational.
Okay.
His own journey from atheism to Christianity actually sheds light on how personal experience can shape belief.
Hold on, wait. He wasn't always a believer. Now that's interesting. Tell me more about this.
Okay, yeah, I gotta hear more about this. Like, Conley, this guy debating these Muslim scholars, he wasn't even always Christian.
Right. It's pretty wild.
That's like a twist.
He talks about how he went from, atheism to Christianity. And it wasn't just like a head thing.
Okay.
He describes reading the Bible and like something changed in him, like a deep down emotional, spiritual thing.
That went beyond just like arguments and proof.
That's really interesting. If a guy who's all about logic and reason can have that kind of like personal experience with faith.
Yeah.
What does that say about like belief itself?
It's a huge question.
Right.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole,
Yeah.
Connolly actually brought up some pretty tough philosophical objections to Islam in the debates.
Okay.
And it got the Muslim debaters kind of fired up,
Oh, I bet. Like what kind of objections are we talking?
So his first one was about how the idea that the Quran's miraculous nature depends on reading it in Arabic.
Okay.
And he argued that if like God's revelation was for everyone, why would it be locked into one specific language?
Yeah, that's a good point. It does seem kind of, I don't know, weird for a universal message to have a language barrier.
Right, exactly. And to be fair, the Muslim debaters, they pushed back. They said that prophets were sent to all nations, implying that the message, of Islam got out there, even if the Quran wasn't translated.
But doesn't that create its own problem? Like, if you only know about those prophets from the Quran, which you got to read in Arabic to really get, how's that helpful to folks who don't speak the language?
It's complicated, right?
Yeah.
It shows you how tricky these interfaith dialogues can be.
Oh, yeah.
Each side's coming from their own set of beliefs, and it can be hard to find that common ground.
Okay, I see how that could get defeated. Yeah. What was Conley's next objection?
His second one was all about historical accuracy.
Okay.
Remember that analogy he made with Scorsese?
Yeah.
He basically argued that if you want to know about Jesus,
right,
the Gospels are better because they were written, closer to the time he lived than the Quran, which came way later.
Right. It's like that telephone game thing, right?
Exactly.
The closer to the source,
the
less chance for things to get messed up.
Exactly. It might be a simple analogy, but it gets at this worry about how history gets, changed over time.
Okay. That makes sense. So what was his last one, his last objection?
This one was probably the most pointed.
Okay.
He argued that both Jesus and Muhammad claimed to be speaking absolute truth, but they contradict each other on some things.
Wait, so two absolute truths can disagree. That doesn't really work, does it?
It's a bit of a problem, logically speaking.
Right.
And this is where the debate gets super interesting,
Okay.
Conley basically says, if two divine revelations clash, maybe both of them are off.
Ooh, that's a tough one to come back from. How'd the Muslim debaters respond to that?
They didn't really address the logical inconsistency. They just kind of doubled down on the Quran being the final word.
Okay.
Superseding all the other scriptures,
So it's like, my holy book is better than yours.
Yeah, basically.
It doesn't sound like much of a debate at that point, just affirming what you already believe.
It does get to that. And it highlights how, with faith, sometimes logic and evidence, they can only take you so far.
Yeah, I see that.
In the end, belief is a personal choice.
Right.
Where you put your trust.
Which brings us back to that big question, doesn't it? How do we figure out what's true when there are so many different claims? And especially when those claims are tied to something so personal, like faith.
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It really is.
And I don't think there's one answer that fits everything.
Yeah.
But I do think these debates, they give us a way to approach those questions.
Okay, how so?
They make us look at different views, check our own assumptions, and really wrestle with how complicated belief is.
Not easy.
No, it's not. And even if we don't walk away with like a clear answer,
Yeah.
just the process of like thinking it through can be super insightful.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've got these disagreements about scripture, history that's hard to unravel.
All right.
And then faith, which logic can't fully explain. It's a lot.
It is. And don't forget, these aren't just ideas we're talking about.
Yeah.
These debates, they hit on like the biggest questions humans have ever asked.
Oh, wow.
Truth, the meaning of life, does God exist?
Heavy stuff.
Right.
But I got to say, even though I'm not religious, I'm finding this whole thing super fascinating. It makes me think about what I believe,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely, yeah.
and how I even got there.
And I think that's one of the most valuable things about these deep dive.
Yeah.
They push us to think critically, to question what we assume,
Right.
and to engage with ideas that maybe we don't agree with, you know?
Yeah.
It's about broadening our understanding, even if it gets a little uncomfortable.
Well said. Okay, so I'm ready for more. Back to Conley's atheism to Christianity thing.
Yeah.
Was there like one specific thing that made him convert? So like, what was the turning point for Conley? Was it like, boom, revelation, or more of a slow burn?
Seems like a bit of both. You know, he talks about being drawn to Christianity intellectually, but also this like deep change inside him when he was reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Like something shifted that he couldn't explain with just logic.
It's like what we were saying before, right?
Yeah.
Faith isn't always just about being rational.
Right.
It's got that gut feeling, intuition, personal stuff mixed in.
Yeah.
And I think even if you don't agree with Conley's beliefs, a lot of people can relate to that. Like when an idea just clicks for you
Absolutely.
deeper than just thinking about it.
And what's cool is it breaks that stereotype, right? Of the atheist being all cold and logical.
Yeah.
Here's this guy deep in the arguments, the philosophy, but he finds something more in faith.
Wow.
Something beyond just the head stuff.
It makes it way more human, you know? These aren't just theological debates happening in a vacuum.
Oh, not at all.
It's tied to real people, their struggles with believing, doubting, trying to figure out life.
Exactly. It reminds us that these debates about scriptures, history, truth, they're not just for scholars. They're happening inside people as they figure out their own faith and values.
Which loops back to our big question, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we decide what's true? Especially with faith, where so much depends on what you personally believe.
That's the toughest one of all, I think.
Yeah.
No easy answer, no formula that works every time.
Right.
But these debates, they give us tools, right, to even approach the question.
Okay.
They make us look at different sides, check our own biases, think about history, the personal stuff that shapes beliefs.
So even if we don't get a perfect answer, the thinking itself is what matters.
Absolutely. It's about growing our understanding, getting better at critical thinking, and having empathy for folks who believe different things. Sometimes that's more important than finding the right answer.
I like that. This whole deep dive has given me so much to think about.
Good.
Definitely made me question some things I thought I knew.
That's great to hear.
And appreciate, like, how complicated this stuff really is.
That's what we're going for.
Well, you nailed it. So if anyone wants to dive deeper into this, the full video of the debates, it's on Jaden Forrest's YouTube channel.
Definitely check it out.
He does an awesome job of making it all, like, understandable, even if it's tough topics.
Yeah, he's great.
And hey, if you liked this deep dive into faith, history, all that big stuff, make sure you subscribe to Fred Macaria News for more of this kind of thought-provoking content.
We'd love to have you.
Hit that like button, leave a comment with what you think.
Yeah, let us know.
And share this with anyone who enjoys a good brain workout, you know?
Keep those minds sharp.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration. Until next time.